cosign trap has already decimated more family fortunes than any market collapse in history. Long before your ancestors were born, the Bible identified it as a snare. Solomon didn't merely caution against debt, he provided the precise escape plan. Before we conclude, a prayer for your financial legacy awaits. Here is the truth about Proverbs chapter 6 that is rarely discussed. The first 5 verses aren't just soft advice from a religious elder. They represent a surgical diagnosis from a man who managed resources valued by modern economists at roughly $2 trillion. He possessed every reason to comprehend the impact of tied capital on a human life. He observed it from both perspectives, as the primary lender and as the monarch overseeing a nation of citizens who had entangled themselves in obligations from which they could not break free. Read Proverbs chapter 6, verses 1 through 5, very slowly. Solomon writes, "My son, if you have put up security for your neighbor, if you have shaken hands and pledged for a stranger, you have been trapped by what you said, ensnared by the words of your mouth. So do this, my son, to free yourself since you have fallen into your neighbor's hands. Go to the point of exhaustion and give your neighbor no rest. Allow no sleep to your eyes, no slumber to your eyelids. Free yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the snare of the fowler. A gazelle does not attempt to negotiate with the netting. It does not petition the hunter to change his mind. It does not wait for the sun to rise. It runs. Someone asked you to co-sign their loan, and because of your affection for them, you agreed. That was the exact moment the trap snapped shut. Pay attention to what Solomon never claimed. He never suggested the person asking was malicious. He never stated the relationship was insincere. He said you are now captured by the very words of your own mouth. The snare wasn't laid by an enemy. It was set by your own generosity lacking discernment. There is a massive and catastrophic distinction between those two things. Here is the financial truth that no family gathering ever explains with clarity. When a lending institution demands a cosigner, what they are communicating is clinical and precise. The primary borrower does not qualify based on their own merits. After calculating every variable, the institution looked at the data and concluded this individual lacks the income history, the credit standing, or the behavioral reliability to be trusted with this debt alone. That is the professional verdict of a trained expert whose sole job is risk assessment. The bank isn't being heartless, the bank is being honest. Then the family approaches you. Stop right there. What just occurred? The institution said no. The family said yes, but requested that you stand in the financial breach. They didn't ask for your cash directly. They asked you to guarantee their money. This isn't an act of generosity. This is pressure exerted against your love. Now listen to what the biblical wisdom tradition calls this specific position. It utilizes the Hebrew word arav, translated as surety. Proverbs 17:18 declares, "One who has no sense shakes hands in pledge and puts up security for a neighbor." Not a stranger, but a neighbor, someone close to you. This is the B-side verse that almost no sermon addresses because it is uncomfortable. It implies that co-signing for the person you care about most is, within Solomon's framework, an act of deficient judgment regardless of your noble intentions. This is where contemporary culture and ancient wisdom collide with violence. The culture claims love takes the risk. The word says love protects its stewardship. Biblical financial objectives are not about hoarding wealth for personal comfort. They are about maintaining independence so you can remain capable of generosity on your own terms. A man who co-signs becomes financially enslaved to the decisions of another person. He wakes up every morning with his credit, his peace, and his future placed inside the behavioral choices of someone else. That is not a financial goal. That is a surrender of your sovereignty. Here is where the instruction deepens to a point that almost hurts. The borrower is not the villain, but co-signing quietly eliminates the borrower's most effective motivator. Consequence. When someone else carries the liability, the psychological weight of the debt shifts. Subconsciously or consciously, the borrower knows there is a safety net beneath them. The urgency vanishes, the discipline softens, and the co-signer stands on the edge, watching. If this teaching is hitting home right now, if you can feel the weight of a choice you've already made or are being pressured to make, you are not alone. Across every generation, this trap has been sprung on the most loving people in the room. That is why Solomon didn't write this warning for the greedy. He wrote it for sons and daughters. He wrote it for people like you. Where are you watching from right now? Share your city or country in the comments. Let this community see how far this wisdom is traveling today. Imagine a merchant in ancient Jerusalem. He has two sons. One has established a grain trading business with 5 years of consistent profit. The other is brilliant, charming, and full of potential, but has never managed to maintain a stable income for more than 8 months at a time. The second son approaches his father with a proposal. He has discovered an olive oil contract, an extraordinary deal, the kind that appears once in a generation. He needs resources he does not possess. The merchant, in his love, pledges his own warehouse as collateral. 6 months later, the harvest fails. The contract collapses. The merchant loses the warehouse. And the first son, the one who had built something real, now has no place to store his grain. One act of misplaced generosity resulted in 2 financial casualties. This is not a modern parable. This is the pattern Solomon documented from thousands of such arrangements he witnessed and adjudicated as king. His wealth did not stem from sentiment. It came from his ruthless clarity regarding asymmetric risk, a concept that Nassim Taleb would not formally describe in writing until nearly 3,000 years later. The principle is ancient. When an arrangement offers you 0 upside and 100% downside, that arrangement is not generosity. It is a trap dressed in the language of love. Solomon's personal fortune was not built by accident. Scripture records in 1 Kings 10:14 that the weight of gold that came to Solomon in a single year was 666 talents, an amount that staggers modern economic calculation. He controlled trade routes, managed alliances, built with precision, and protected with ferocity. He did not accumulate that kind of provision by pledging his resources against other people's uncertainty. Here is what the bank already knew that you didn't. When a financial institution declines a loan application, they aren't being bureaucratic. They are completing a probabilistic analysis built on thousands of similar profiles. Their models account for income volatility, default history, and behavioral indicators. When they say no, they are communicating a judgment about risk that is, statistically speaking, more accurate than your emotional assessment of the person you love. This isn't cold. This is responsible. Wealth protection rule number 1 has never changed since Solomon wrote it down. Never pledge what you cannot afford to lose. Not your warehouse, not your credit, not your savings, not your retirement, and not the inheritance you were building for the next generation. If this wisdom is resonating with you right now, take a second and press that like button. You are watching content built from the oldest financial playbook ever written. There is a difference between being generous and being exploited. The distance between those two things is called a boundary. Generosity says, here is what I can freely give without damage to what I am responsible for. Enabling says, here is everything I have because saying no feels unloving. One of these builds families, the other destroys them quietly over years. The moment you co-sign, you do not just enter a financial arrangement, you enter a relational dynamic that money tends to corrupt. Think carefully about this. Consider a scenario that is almost universal. You co-sign for a family member's car loan. 3 months in, the payments are late. You receive a call from the lender. You cover the payment to protect your credit. You do not tell your family member immediately because you want to avoid conflict. Now there is a secret, and secrets between people who love each other are like acid. They eat at trust, at respect, and at the ease of simply sharing a meal together. The money doesn't just cost you financially, it costs you the version of that relationship that existed before the debt entered it. John Wesley, who managed the finances of an entire Methodist movement with almost no personal wealth of his own, understood the relationship between money and moral character. He taught that the 3 rules of financial stewardship were simple and severe. Earn all you can, save all you can, give all you can. But that third commandment, give all you can, was always subject to the first condition. You can only give what you have honestly earned and wisely protected. A man who co-signs what he does not have and cannot control is not giving. He is gambling with obligation. Now here is the psychological truth that makes the co-sign trap especially brutal. When the borrower knows someone else is legally responsible for the debt stops feeling entirely real to them. Accountability requires personal consequence. Remove the consequence, and you remove the accountability. This is not a moral judgment against the borrower. It is a behavioral observation. Humans are wired to respond to stakes. When the stakes are transferred to someone else, the urgency transfers with them. This is why Solomon's language in Proverbs 6 is so visceral. He doesn't say, consider carefully. He says, run. He says, give no sleep to your eyelids. He treats the cosign obligation as an emergency because once human behavior, compounding interest, and relationship tension are mixed together, the damage accelerates faster than most people anticipate. The wisest thing you can say to someone you love is this: I will help you qualify on your own. I will sit with you, help you build your income, review your plan, and pray over your direction, but I will not sign my name to your obligation. That sentence preserves the relationship, builds the borrower's capacity, and protects the legacy you are building. So what do you actually do if the trap has already closed? You have already signed. The paperwork exists. The obligation is legal. The borrower is already showing signs of inconsistency. This is where many people freeze, paralyzed between the fear of financial damage and the social cost of confronting someone they love. Solomon's instruction from Proverbs 6 is not symbolic, it is operational. Go immediately, do not rest. Humble yourself if necessary and make every effort to be released from the obligation. In practical terms, that means having a direct conversation with the borrower, exploring refinancing options in the borrower's name alone as their financial profile improves, consulting with a financial counselor about legal separation from the loan, and documenting every payment arrangement going forward in writing. This is not betrayal, this is stewardship. And stewardship of your resources is not selfishness, it is obedience. Here is where Charlie Munger's framework enters with force. Munger spent decades teaching investors that every financial decision carries a hidden second cost. Not just what the decision costs you today, but what it costs you in terms of the opportunity you are now unable to pursue. He called this opportunity cost, and he considered it one of the most consistently ignored principles in financial decision-making. Every dollar locked inside a co-signed obligation has been removed from your investment capacity. If that capital or credit capacity had instead been directed toward a compounding asset, what would it have become over 5 or 10 years? Munger's insight is precise. The true cost of a bad financial decision is never just the loss itself. It is the loss plus the compound growth that loss prevented. Solomon expressed the same principle through the lens of provision, that resources misaligned from their purpose cannot multiply in the direction God intended. Then there is the dimension of prayer, not as a final resort, but as a first action. Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. This is not a verse about passive waiting. It is an invitation to active alignment. When you bring your financial decisions before the Lord, when you ask for clarity before the signature rather than after the damage, you access discernment that no credit model can replicate. Breaking the pattern of financial entanglement in a family lineage sometimes requires deliberate, specific prayer, not a general blessing, but a targeted petition. Lord, I break agreement with every financial obligation that was entered through fear, through social pressure, or through misplaced loyalty. I reclaim the stewardship of what you have placed in my hands. Redirect what was misaligned. Restore what was lost. This is the prayer of a person who has decided that their provision belongs first to God's purpose. Charles Spurgeon, preaching in 19th century London, never hesitated to call debt what it actually is. In John Plowman's talk, Spurgeon wrote with characteristic bluntness, "He that hateth suretyship is sure." He didn't dress it in theology, he quoted it plainly. Then he added his own warning. Very often he who lends his money loses both his gold and his friends, and he who is surety is never sure. The man who becomes a financial guarantor for another, Spurgeon observed, does not simply risk money, he risks the relationship, the peace of his household, and the stability that allows him to operate as a steward of God's provision. This is the closing wisdom. Good abandonment is not cruelty, It is clarity. When someone asks you to cosign, the most loving response you can give them is the one that honors both your responsibility and their growth. It sounds like this: I love you, and because I love you, I cannot legally tie my financial future to a decision that is yours to own. What I can do is help you build the foundation to qualify on your own. I will walk that road with you, but I will not sign my name to it. There is no war in that sentence. There is no rejection. There is only the quiet authority of a person who understands what stewardship means. If this teaching has shifted something in you today, if you are walking away with a different posture toward your resources, your relationships, and your obligations, please subscribe to this channel. This wisdom compounds daily here. Do not miss what comes next. Now, if you can, close your eyes or simply align your thoughts with mine right now. Let the noise of the day fall away. You are about to receive something more valuable than financial advice. You are about to receive alignment. Father, I come before you on behalf of every person who has heard this teaching today. I ask you to bring clarity to every entangled financial situation where obligations were entered through fear or pressure. I ask for your hand of release. Where resources have been blocked, I ask for your restoration. Where relationships have been strained by money, I ask for your reconciliation. Grant wisdom before the signature. Grant discernment before the handshake. Let the financial decisions of this household and this lineage be governed by your word and not by sentiment alone. You are the one who provides. You are the one who directs. We align our stewardship with your purpose today. Amen. May the peace of God, which surpasses all financial logic and every human calculation, guard your heart and your provision from this day forward. Walk wisely, protect what you have been given, and run like the gazelle from every snare. If this story has changed the way you look at the financial traps in your life, please subscribe and like this channel. We are uncovering the ancient wisdom that the world has tried to bury. Secure your future. The next treasure of insight will be open soon.